Teen Poetry Slam champions. He is now 29 years old, board member. This is Niles Lictenstein.
It's been a long time. I'm gonna just move this one over. You don't even pick up on your stage cues that James just had over there. It's kind of funny, but it has been a long time. It's been over a decade, so let me relish this moment. So bear with me for a second. Thank you everybody for coming out today. Thank you to the youth for their brave words that were just spoken. To James and the YouthSpeaks staff for architecting and building this incredible platform, and for all of you guys here tonight. It's not just about the money for the fundraiser, although that's partially some of the reason for this evening, but it's really about the energy and community around the YouthSpeaks mission. I want to give appreciation to my friends and family who came out and are occupying this area, so thank you for coming out. My mom and girlfriend, and a few special guests, Linda Mornell, Bob and Michelle Friend, who are not only generous contributors to YouthSpeaks, but also personal mentors and inspirations and friends of mine. As some of you might know, I am an alumni of YouthSpeaks, better known to the young poets as the old school generation of spoken word artists. I had a parchment and quill. They now have an iPhone, clearly. That was pretty amazing. I also had the pleasure of being a part of another special group, and that's the YouthSpeaks board. And it's allowed me to give something back to something that has impacted me in tremendous ways throughout my life. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But tonight, James asked me to speak, which is an honor. And the day he called me up, I actually ran to my closet, and believe it or not, I have a box of YouthSpeaks memorabilia. I reached into the box, grabbed my YouthSpeaks Brave New Voices Year 2000 t-shirt, attempted to put it on, but my body mass and a decade of gravity hasn't played nice, and the only thing thinner is my hair. But wearing my newly midriff artifact / apparel, I started to read some of my old poems. Having been inspired by many of these incredible youth over the years, I closed my eyes and I was transported back to when I was 16. When I was 16, I first met poetry. It whispered in my ears dreams that seemed too big for my reality. Words that carried weight and meaning far beyond my years, far beyond the expectations of those adults around me. I shivered at the feeling of expression passing through my spine, quivered as my modern-day quill of a ballpoint pen inked words into existence. Other is not a race was my first ever poem. My first mandate to the world that ethnicity should not be defined inside a single box. A statement of self that a hybrid kid from a multinational background was not synonymous to lack of identity. Tuned into a movement of mixed race minds and changing demographics, a decade later in the 2010 census, the words, "Please check all that apply," were found. After that, my next poem was called Standardized Minds. It was my diatribe on the impact of standardized tests on pedagogy, watching my fellow students and friends lose footing as we became tracked on different paths. I wrote, "How can we stand straight when our backs are bent into boxes and future fates rest on the restricted breath of a number 2 pencil tip? When reality is based in fact, not fractions, yet factions are created by those deemed intelligent or not. Ivory gates of Ivy Leagues hinge open as cells in San Quentin lock down with equations that end in strikes that resemble X's and questions that resemble Y's. It's ironic that the ones who can't figure out these numbers are the ones who end up as statistics." And it was ironic, because by the time I got to my senior year, half of my friends would drop out of high school, and those same Ivy Leagues I spoke about opened their doors to me after I wrote my college essay in poetry. Cambridge, Massachusetts, as I walked through the hallowed halls at Harvard under the eyes of the definers of history, feeling dwarfed by the great masters and sometimes my own loneliness. The only way I knew how to substantiate myself was to read a poem out loud. It was called Listen. Humans believe that we are the most advanced species. I believe we're just the most dissatisfied. Watching enviously at birds because somewhere along these evolutionary lines we've forgotten how to fly. So caught in the constant chatter of this multi-layered metropolis where mechanical masses move to routine orders for fly-by lunches under golden arches, McMarketed the expedient way, and intertwining cables of internet access with 365 TV channels. The poem was all about mass media and advertising taking my generation away from genuinely connecting. Funny enough, at that talent show, it was performed in front of a few of the future Facebook founders who would ultimately create the quintessential mechanism of connecting through a constant stream of chatter. During my college years, spoken word became my Swiss Army knife. My voice and the ability to use that voice became a powerful tool for any situation. Whether heartbreak or happiness, from boardrooms to barrooms to barrios, poetry was my translation mechanism, my Google goggles to understand and overcome distinctions of class, race, and religion. It gave me a place in the Signet Society, to share a reading room that T.S. Eliot, Walt Whitman, and even Tommy Lee Jones once pondered their own adolescent truths. It gave me the confidence to create a workshop called Finding Freedom Through Language that was a bastion for those students who wanted a safe place to express. Poetry also helped me interpret who I was becoming. In 2004, financial institutions were making massive amounts of dough hand over fist, and the best minds of my generation were going not into civil service, science, and the arts. Oh no, we were trading mortgage-backed securities and credit derivatives on Wall Street, flying on the wings of black swans, and after a summer internship of 100-hour weeks experiencing this world and struggling with the reality of choosing a path, I wrote a poem. It was called, I Used to Be a Poet. And then one day I woke up and became an investment banker. Or perhaps I didn't wake up on that day. Perhaps that's when I went to sleep, calming myself with pillow talk and the hum of my online version of Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal. Tranquilizing all voices that asserted themselves out of reason. It's when pragmatic became automatic. When seeking self and passion became null and void like canceled checks. There were no spiritual checks, no mic checks, but there were paychecks. And scattered stubs lay waywardly on the ground while I sought security in a world where entropy exists amongst 6 billion bouncing beings. And I sought to analyze out life's randomness and quantify the 2.8 kids and their college tuition payments, the New York apartment in the sky at the age of 29, the nightly soirees with traders at trendy restaurants where maitre d's knew me by title, not name, and all the dancing girls looked the same with flat feet whose soles had been worn from sliding down this hierarchy with age as I became less human and more man-made. And pages flipped until all became the same. Until all my dreams had been unwritten and blank sheets screamed silently that this was all a game. This was all a test. To figure out if I could reason out the reasons why seasons would pass and poems blaring in my ears would be ignored, their deafening cries against the dead impressionists whose ineffable creations must linger longer in their skin. The diatribes of dying tribes of men who lose their songs until they are no longer living and we are pacified till passive eyes witness these creative wells run dry and we sit unmoved like mountains until we've braided time into hairbrush locks that dread the day the tick-tock stops. The gift that you are giving, that YouthSpeaks gives, is not just a voice. It's of actualized identities. It's of confident kids that will become adults who will contribute to ways in this world that we can hardly imagine. I've seen many things happen on this stage and in writing workshops. I've seen boys turn to men. I've seen women reclaim their lives. I've seen gang members exchange pistols for poems. I've even seen a young boy who found his voice as an activist, an investment banker, a tech geek and wannabe entrepreneur, who still occasionally uses poetry to find his way. When I was 16, I first met poetry. It whispered in my ears dreams that were too big for my reality. Thank you.